with S. This is Salo with SMNnews.com, and this is my interview of Brendon Small, co-creator of Adult Swim's Metalocalypse and creator of all the music behind the fictional metal band Dethklok. Thanks for doing the interview. I appreciate your time. I actually posted on Facebook that I would be doing this interview, and I got a few questions. I was wondering if we could start out with those.
Sure.
Cool. Jesse Williams, he wants to know what your favorite cartoons and bands were growing up.
Cartoons and bands growing up?
Yeah, like what cartoons did you watch when you were a kid, and also...
Well, as a kid, geez. You know, so funny that, as a kid, I got excited by the cartoon, like, they were like for adults, like, like Fire and Ice from Ralph Bakshi. And I don't know if you ever saw that. American Pop is another one that he did that I thought was really awesome. And, of course, Heavy Metal had a big impact on me. As far as, like, you know, cartoons, I think I watched whatever was on TV, you know, as a kid, like Masters of the Universe or G.I. Joe or any of that stuff. But I don't know that I would call myself a full-blown fan of that stuff. But the stuff that made an impact on me was stuff where, you know, that we're kind of trying to emulate in one way or another on Metal Awesome.
Cool.
Oh, and music?
Yeah.
I grew up, you know, listening to what my parents were listening to, you know, just like, luckily they had a Led Zeppelin album sitting around somewhere, and then they had a 90s Opera, which I used to listen to all the time, Queen. And then growing up, of course, I discovered heavy metal, and it was off to the races. So, honestly, Queen and seeing Flash Gordon, the movie, as a kid, as like a 6-year-old in a movie theater was definitely impactful for me.
Let's see, Mike Roberts, he wants to know if a band of orcs can do a cameo in Metalocalypse.
A band of orcs?
Yeah.
That's a good question, Michael. Yes, they can.
That'd be
How's
awesome. Have you ever heard of a band of orcs?
I thought he actually meant a band of orcs. But yeah, they are a band, right?
Yeah, it's a metal band. It's actually, I live in Santa Cruz, which is actually close to Salinas, where you grew up, right?
That's right. Horrible Salinas.
Band of Orcs is like a really big thing that's happening in metal here, and it's kind of funny.
I gotta check them out. I have heard about them, but I haven't really checked them out yet. Are they Santa Cruz then?
Santa Cruz based, yeah, 100%.
Added to another band that is another Tolkien reference. Monomarth is
Monomarth, that's, you know, obviously a big one, and 3 Inches of Blood and whatnot.
Yeah.
The orcs, they actually do sort of a Gwar-esque, like they dress up, they look like real orcs, like these really realistic, amazing masks, although they would never admit that.
Oh, cool.
They never break character. It's really cool. But yeah,
good.
That's his question.
Tell him sure.
David Waters wants to know what the best show you ever played is and why.
The best show I played live? Oh, geez, well, one of the most fun shows I got to play was, you know, we had to cancel a show once because there was an electrical fire in the sound booth in San Francisco at the, what do you call it thing? The, Fillmore, thank you, Lauren. The Fillmore, yeah, and so it got canceled, and we were like, oh no, and there were crazy fans, and they were really excited. And I wanted really badly to find a way to make this up, and so did everybody else involved. And so we had to drive, I think, from like San Diego all the way back up, and just barely make it enough time to set up our amps and plug in and play and make up the show. And that show was, we ran some news clips because it made national news.
Wow. That
the place had caught on fire. And it was really fun. It was this evening with Dethklok, and I think everyone's playing was just great. The sound in the room was fantastic, and it meant a little more that we got to kind of come back, and the people that got to make it back to the show came back, and it was really fun for that reason. But within that, it's so fun doing the Dethklok thing because I'm playing with separate musicians, and the show's so much fun that we don't really... Our shows are all really fun to play. It really is a blast. That one sticks out as a memorable one.
Let's see. Eric Denmead. First of all, he wants to acknowledge how awesome the guitar solo was in the Guitar-mageddon episode of Home Movies.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And he also wants to know, like, music was always such a heavy theme in home movies. Was a show like Metalocalypse always the end game?
What is he asking?
Like, in home movies, music was a very heavy theme. Like, it was always present.
Oh, was I driving towards a more musical kind of outlet?
Yeah, Metalocalypse, is that just like the logical conclusion?
Well, apparently it was. I don't know if it was predetermined that way, but, you know, I got to do, you know, I was kind of frustrated and didn't really know what my relationship with music was after graduating from music school. And I kind of started falling back in love with my guitar again after, you know, the 90s, which was just such a strange era for guitar where, you know, people stopped taking solos, people were embarrassed by guitar, and all of a sudden just kind of started being cool again to other people. I always played it, you know, I would sit there and work on Ingve licks, you know, in the late 90s and early 2000s just for my own personal pleasure, not knowing if I was going to end up doing anything with it. And then, you know, the people from Adult Swim knew that I could, you know, had a knack for writing a couple, you know, songs and stuff, and I knew that they knew this, and I said, you know, I think the next project's going to be about kind of metal and what's going on with metal right now, kind of. Mm-hmm. With the fact that I'm excited by it. I'm excited by people really playing their guitars again, and I think I have to focus on that. So, and I'll just do all the music myself. So, yeah. I guess it is a logical step.
Devin Amaral, he wants to know why Coach McGurk in home movies was such an awesome character, and if that character is based on anyone.
He's compared because John Benjamin is a hilarious comic actor, the guy who played him, and it's that simple, you know. It was such a putting that character together was just like, okay, I think this is how sloppy we were. We sat in a room, and like me and Lauren Bouchard, who co-created the show, and said, okay, I'm going to play a kid, and I don't know, I played a lot of soccer as a kid, probably like a soccer coach, okay, get John Benjamin, you can play the soccer coach, let's just improvise for a while, and then that was the soccer coach. It was that simple.
Awesome.
And it was easy to write for, he's always hilarious, and yeah, he's hard to beat, and I watch a lot of, you know, shows, and it's hard to get that vibe. I know that people have, I don't know, yeah. We're so lucky to kind of be able to have that character on the show.
Yeah. Trevor Horton, and this one's a little weird, I apologize, but Trevor Horton wants to know if you will forcibly fill him with your DNA.
Sure. Tell him sure.
Sure, got it.
You know, I don't know what that's going to do.
Yeah. I think he just likes you a lot.
Yeah. Make the fans happy.
I guess I should probably get off home movies soon, but you chose to go out on sort of a bummer note with home movies. Why'd you choose that?
It's interesting. You know, it's not. It really isn't. It's actually probably it's the most in that show. The way that episode is what we were doing in that episode. It doesn't, you know, and what our intent was to show that the kid doesn't need this crutch anymore. You know, the reason that he got this camera in the first place was because his parents and the family split up, and his father kind of gave that camera to the kid as a parting gift, and said, you know, have fun growing up, and everything in that viewfinder that he turned the camera on was something that was in his control.
Right.
And when he dropped the camera out the window and sat in the car, he realized that he has the family that he needed to have, and he doesn't need the camera anymore. It's there if he wants it, you know, but he doesn't need this crutch. He doesn't need to be in control. He can start living life. So it's positive, you know?
Yeah.
It's basically, you don't have to live in a fantasy land anymore.
It's also sad, I mean, to see it go.
Well, it's the last episode, but how many shows really get to know what their last episode is, and get to write it? I think we're so happy to have been able to have been given the luxury of writing our last episode. You know how many shows that are great shows just get yanked off the air?
Yeah.
And it's just that last episode that's it.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
You know?
So you've done I just have to, we don't have a whole lot of time, do we? So I just have to kind of move around real quick, although I'd like to talk a lot.
That's okay.
You've done voices on Venture Brothers.
Yeah.
Do you remember which characters? No.
I think I was the original Sergeant Hatred. And then, what's his face, I guess, Jackson Public was like, I'm not paying Brendon Small to keep doing this voice. I'll do it. I can pretty much do the same voice. He started doing it because, he's on the other coast. And I was like, I said, as a show creator, I completely understand. I would do the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm. You did
do myself.
Drug-addicted Johnny Quest, I think.
I did Johnny Quest, and then I did, like, a boxer or something like that. It was funny because anything I usually do, I kind of stay away from after the fact. I do it just because the fun of doing a voiceover is the act of actually doing it, of being creative on the spot, of taking their lines and adding a little bit more personality to it, hopefully, and maybe improvising a couple of lines. And that is really the fun. Watching the final product is usually super fun if you're just an audience, but when I know it's me doing it, I'm not as excited by it. But it's a great show, and it's always super fun to work with those guys.
You've done work on Aqua Teen Hunger Force, Reno 911, Squidbillies, among others. What draws you to the world of adult cartoons, alternative comedy?
I think what draws me, obviously, I think Adult Swim has introduced a brand new, when they came out, and continually, I think, they actually introduced a new style of humor. I don't think that style really existed before. Before they really kind of shone a light on what they were doing, these bunch of weirdos from Atlanta and Aqua Teen Hunger Force and all that stuff. But I was really excited to see people that are being creative and different and odd and non-linear and absurd and stuff, and still having logic at the same time. But some kind of weird thing keeps on drawing me to other stuff, and I don't know. It's ultimately I realize that I'm around to be creative, and it's a true luxury that I get to do that and be able to pay rent at the same time.
Right.
And I'm interested in doing stuff that I haven't seen before, having a new take on something else, And luckily, all these shows fit into that category.
I guess moving on to Dethklok, which is probably what you're most known for. You are a co-producer, co-writer, composer, voice actor with Tommy Blacha.
Yeah, well, I write all the music and co-creator, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you get the idea. Yeah, I do stuff on it, right?
What does your job description include? Like, what do you do behind the scenes?
I'm the... I write the show. I create the show with Tommy. I do the voices. I write all the music, and then I write and record the records, and I go on tour, and then now, putting out this guitar.
Right.
And so there's a bunch of cool things that I get to kind of, I decided a long time ago I didn't just want to be a writer, I didn't just want to be a musician. There's got to be a way to be able to do all that stuff, and luckily I lucked into it,
Right. Speaking of the guitar, Gibson is producing a Dethklok signature guitar. Were you involved with the design?
Yeah, I was involved in every single part of it. This is the coolest part where I go, okay, I've gotten to make TV shows, I've gotten to put out records and go on tour and open up for Iron Maiden, and now I have a signature guitar. What do I do? Now what do I do? Because I think I've done everything I want to do. But yeah, I worked very closely with Gibson, and I worked very closely with Gibson from the dawning of the show. I mean, you can see their guitars in every single episode because I wanted this world to be authentic musically, and that was one of my main goals. Because I knew the characters would come, I knew the comedy would come, I knew the overarching story was going to be there, but I wanted to make sure that all these little tiny bells and whistles were there for the guitar lovers.
Right.
And luckily, throughout the years, we've gotten this kind of guitar-heavy audience.
Yeah.
And, we put out a tablature book for the first Dethklok record, and for the bass, for a bass tablature book. We just put that out too, and people have been buying them like crazy. And it was kind of like a clue to us to go to the next step, which was basically Gibson said, "What about a signature guitar?" And I go, "Absolutely." And they said, "What would it be?" And I said, "Well, I love the Explorer shape, and the guitarist on the show, Squid Elf, uses this guitar, and I use it all the time too. I just love the shape and I love the sound, and I want it to be that, but I want to do something that I haven't seen." So I wanted to make it a silver burst, and not change too much of the design, but just change aesthetic. And we went back and forth and got the burst right and got the right pickups in there and got the binding right and wanted to make it look as cool as it possibly could and still be a classic Gibson at the same time.
Right.
And we got there, and it's got a very subtle Dethklok reference on it. But I think if you look at this guitar, you just think this is an awesome guitar.
Yeah.
And then you look very close and you go, that's a Dethklok reference. And they made a limited edition, and it's really cool. It plays and sounds fantastic.
Yeah, so you have one, I assume.
Yes, I do.
Are you going to be using it on the show, like recording the albums, the music?
Well, I'm recording a solo album right now. I'm recording and mixing it right now. That's got me and the same drummer, Gene Hoagland, and Brian Beller, who plays bass with us live, who's played with Steve Vai and stuff. And I'm doing a solo record, and I've been using, they gave me a prototype of it, and I've been using it all over the record, and it sounds awesome. You'll hear it on, I'm going to be putting out more information about this, but it's more of a rock and roll record, this record that I'm doing, but it's a big, ridiculous concept album.
Is it?
It's very melodic with melodic vocals, but, same Dethklok drummer, same Dethklok guitarist and bassist,
So you're doing the vocals, the melodic ones?
I'm doing the vocals, yeah, and they're melodic. They're not like, Mason Explosion, Cookie Monster style.
Exactly. Is that pretty exciting? That's kind of we haven't seen that from you yet, have we?
No, you haven't. I mean, it's somewhere in between home movies and Dethklok, but it's energetic, and it's got it's as big and grandiose and epic as it can be. Tons of layered vocals, tons of layered guitars. And it's really easy on the ears, but it's still got moments of lots of heavy metal elements in it too. So it's a different sound, but it definitely sounds like something I would do, I think.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. You toured with Chimera in 2008. I just talked to Mark Hunter yesterday.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he said to mention Rune and Troll 2.
Yeah, we did a movie trade on that tour.
Nice.
And I showed them. I had brought The Room with me. Have you seen that movie?
No, actually.
Okay, it's called The Room.
Okay.
Check out theroommmovie.com. I think Adult Swim aired it one time, but it is and then it's this fantastically screwy movie that thinks that it's this Tennessee Williams style chamber drama.
Mm-hmm.
You must see it. I can't describe it more than that. And I said, you guys have to check this out. And and they had a really great collection of films. I was really impressed. I was like, you guys are all right. And we became fast friends because of this. And so they gave me Troll 2, which I had only seen bits and pieces of.
Mm-hmm.
And that became, something that I would show all my friends. And of course, now with the documentary that's out, the best worst movie and everything, clearly that's caught on wildfire. But it was really fun. They started quoting on the Room, and I just was blown away by Troll 2 and made everyone on my bus watch it over and over again. But yeah, I really love my films to be either fantastic or abominable. None of this in between bullshit.
Nice. Back on the subject of guitarists, you do have a series of tablature books, and you just released a bass anthology. One thing, aren't bassists supposed to just load equipment and put bottles of water on the stage?
It's funny. You've got to check out the bass, and it's very funny that I have relentlessly made fun of, one bass player in particular on the show. But I wrote a page-long disclaimer of how I actually felt about the bass and feel about the bass in the introduction of the book.
Oh, nice.
Of the bass book. So you've got to check that out and take a look at what I read, because I think that answers all the questions. But that is a very funny question.
Well, do you think bassists will get a lot out of the tab books?
Absolutely. And the reason that the tab book is so great is because, I played all the bass on except for one song on the first two Death albums, and but I hired Brian Beller, who was just a monster bass player who went to the same music school that I did, but also played with the likes of Mike Chameleon and Zappa Brothers and Steve Vai, just a guy who can do anything. And one thing I do on the record is I really like to have big, grandiose guitar harmonies and layered rhythm guitars and stuff like that. And to try to create that live with two guitarists and a bass player is kind of a difficult proposal, unless you're playing with Brian Beller, who is not only kind of a bass player, but also treats the bass as a rhythm guitar and a bass at the same time. So what he did was he took some of my original bass lines and reharmonized them and made them more harmonically rich and did more complicated, cool rhythms in order to get our live, like our huge, big, fat live sound that we ended up getting throughout this tour. And a lot of that was because of him. So I said, why don't we have you transcribe what you're doing and show bass players that side of the bass playing?
That's awesome.
And he did that, and it's a brand new take, and I think it's the kind of thing where guitarists think that they can play bass, and they kind of can, but they really don't really think like a bass player. And hanging out with Brian Beller over the last 3-4 years, I have learned so much more about bass, and I love bass, and I've got a great bass and a really great bass rig, and I really, really enjoy playing it, and I really listen to bass on albums, but I think I became a better bass player hanging out with him.
That's awesome.
And it really, it's, and I actually think, as a writer from a bass point of view, because I really put a lot of different root motion, or, I consider where the bass is in the song and how that really does push stuff forward.
Nice. Speaking real quick, I do want to talk more about the tab books, but I just wanted to point out, you said that you went to the same music school as Brian Beller, and that was the Berklee College of Music, right? Yeah. And you graduated.
Yeah, Berklee College of Music in Boston.
97. That's like the most prestigious musical school there is, right?
It's I think it is one of the. I don't know. It doesn't mean that I learned anything great. I learned, actually. You know what? You get into it what you get out of it what you put into it,
right.
And it really is a really high rated school. And it is. I think it's probably one of the highest rated contemporary music schools in the U.S. But that doesn't mean you have to be a genius to go there.
Okay.
Because I went there.
You also studied at Emerson, comedy and writing.
Yeah. That was something that was happening as I was kind of... 4 years of music school is a long time, and at some point you kind of lose your musical identity because you're studying all these different styles.
Right.
And I wanted to play power chords and, sweep arpeggios. And while I was doing that, I realized that all I was doing was studying and basically Woody Allen movies and Marx Brothers and just comedy and stuff like that, just on my own time. That I was just obsessed with comedy. And I knew at some point I'm going to have to get on stage and explore this, because I don't know what I'm doing with my guitar at this point. So luckily our schools were affiliated, and I hung out with Emerson people who were writing and filming and stuff, and I would end up helping them either score their projects, or I would even act in projects, and then I found myself co-writing, and then at an editing day trying to edit this stuff, and I thought, I don't have to be here, but for some reason I'm hanging out here with all these people doing really fun stuff. I'm going to start taking classes here. I'm going to start taking it very seriously, and not only that, I want to be able to turn in scripts and stuff that's better written and funnier than the people whose major it is here, and I got very competitive, And the cool thing about that whole Emerson experience was my teacher, Mike Bent, taught a sketch writing class. And I'm a music major, now writing sketches, and then I got to, the final was you had to go perform in a comedy club.
Oh, wow.
And, so next thing you know, you're on stage in an actual comedy club, and you're hopefully getting laughs. You either fail or pass accordingly. And
did that lead to Lauren Bouchard spotting you?
Well, what happened was I got a taste for it, and I said, okay, I'm going to be able to do sketches. Okay, you're there with a group of people. You got this whole support system on stage, but now I got to take away the support system and start doing stand-up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like quitting smoking or something. You pick a date, you go to an open mic, and you just start going, and then you go again, and you keep going, and you figure out a lot of stuff. And I naturally started, you write tons of jokes and stuff like that, and then I kept on experimenting, and I started my forte ended up kind of being more like doing absurd characters on stage. And Lauren saw me do that one night, and I hadn't even been doing comedy a year. And luckily, it was a good night because every other night isn't. When you're starting out, and you have some long walks home.
Right.
But he saw me on a good night, and we hit it off immediately.
That's fantastic, and that leads to home movies.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Real quick, I guess I want to wrap up on the tablature thing. Was you are now putting out these books. You are now sort of a teacher, somewhat of a mentor to maybe a new generation, or in a lot of cases, an older generation of guitarists. Do you relish that? Do you like guiding people's playing?
Oh, well, geez, I guess I don't think about that. I do think that I think about guitar constantly, and I know that there are a couple things that helped me get through guitar playing and helped me kind of realize, oh, listen, there's this big fall-off point where you want to play guitar, and then one day I think you go, wait a minute, I think I can do this, and I think I can play like my heroes, like not only like a couple blues licks in a guitar store, but I think I could learn how to play like Eddie Van Halen, or I think I can play like Yngwie Malmsteen. And and you just realize, you just kind of start taking the barriers away in your mind, and you realize, I've got two hands, and so do they. And they're not magic. They just work hard. And if I work hard, then I can do it too. I can make all those sounds happen. No one is more special than the other person. Some people may have a natural physical understanding, but I didn't. Everything about the guitar was hard, but I got to a point where I could play stuff.
Actually, I remember reading somewhere that your first live performance, you couldn't control your shaking, and it took you like 10 years.
Oh, yeah, I was one of the reasons I also forced myself to do stand-up, because I couldn't live like that anymore. As a self-conscious, nervous nerd, I had to go and start doing something about it, because I figured, I'm going to probably live for a while. I can't walk down the street not knowing what to do with my hands, because I'm too self-conscious.
Right.
So, so I keep doing stand-up. I've been doing a lot of stand-up lately. And it's always such a fantastic challenge. But luckily, I started out by failing big as a teenager at a guitar competition.
Wow.
And that was humbling, humiliating, and embarrassing, because I told all my friends that I've been playing guitar, and they're like, yeah, I saw you play. I don't think you really are a guitar player. You're like, no, but you've got to see me in my bedroom when I'm safe, not in front of these people. But I figure I have to learn how to do this. I've got no choice. Otherwise, I'm going to live as a miserable individual for the rest of my life. I've got to. But anyway, the fact that people are learning these licks, it's funny, because I just have, what I'm doing is a collection of ripping off people that have done it, far better than me before. So I don't know that it's anything special, but I love talking guitar now, and I used to teach guitar too. So
that's awesome. Do you still do any?
Yeah, when I was in music school, I was teaching people from different colleges.
Let's see. You do a lot of voices for Metalocalypse. Each one very unique. Like, if I didn't read the credits, I might not even know that they're the same dude.
Right.
Have they existed for some time in various forms, or did you create those voices just for the show?
They were pretty much created for the show, it was a fun challenge, because the idea is to make them sound totally dissimilar from one another, and that was part of why they sound so dissimilar, is because the idea is that I wanted me and Tom to do the majority of the voices, because we're going to be there all the time, and I know how animation production works from home movies, that there's a lot of replacing of dialogue, there's a lot of little nips and tucks that happen throughout the production that make you, that force you to kind of like re-record voices and to streamline the story a little bit more. So it'd be best if it were two people and not actors that are, in Hawaii or Brazil, doing other projects half the time. So I said, it's got to be us. We have to do the majority of the voices, and I think this is a smart move. And it ended up being a smart move, because you can go and change it and, have a better joke and just dash into the booth very quickly and re-record a line.
That's awesome.
So, it was an experiment. I knew that, lead singer would have a death metal voice. I knew that the guitarist was that attitude was based off of a few different people from Europe, attended music school, and then a friend or two. It was just a big combination of different attitudes that I'd kind of come across. And Pickles was just going to sound like my normal speaking voice for a while, then Matt was like, it's too, think of something else. And I was like, okay, I think that's a good idea. Yeah, just messing around and improvising and feeling free to goof off until you're getting laughs from your friends.
And Nathan's voice, I mean, I would love to know how the hell you do that.
It's almost like, this is embarrassing, but when I drove cross-country to move to L.A. from Boston, I was going to try to teach myself how to see if I can do that throat singing. I was like, I'm going to sit here, and I'm going to try to learn how to throat sing. And I couldn't do it. But what happened was, I realized if you push your voice and got that lower guttural thing, your voice sounds like it's an octave lower than it is. Because listen to my speaking voice; it's not that low.
Right.
But if you start and Louis Armstrong, it's that thing. It's almost like relaxing your voice and getting. It's an illusion of adding kind of an octave lower to it. So if I start like Louis Armstrong talks all the way down here like that. But then you could just keep on. You just push your voice as far as it can, and then make your voice as low as. I mean, that's half of voiceovers is trying to get your voice to sound different, and you really can make your voice sound so different from another character. And half of it is just changing up your rhythm of speech too. All of a sudden, it sounds like a different person talking.
Wow, is it hard to deliver lines in Nathan's voice clearly?
No, that was the thing that we had to do. Is we had to sit and improvise for a long time because we could do one-off, big pronouncements from each of these characters. And I thought I've got to learn how to speak conversationally.
Right.
How would this guy speak if he just woke up or whatever, or if he's on the phone trying to check his bank account or something. He would just probably sound like a regular guy, but with a little bit of that voice. So I tried to find a way to kind of throw that whole thing away a little bit more. And so did Tommy, to his credit. So, and then you can start thinking like them and improvising like them, and then you start to develop character. And again, doing stuff on set, like I said, that was the most fun I have is when I can develop a character on stage and be able to improvise clearly. To be able to think clearly as that character. Then you never run out of material, and the audience is just with you because they buy that that's the character. And that's, I think, 90% of TV is just committing to that. People don't give a shit about the story half the time. They just want to see those people that they like.
You seem to have a great respect. Actually reminds me a little bit of Patton Oswalt, who he has a real respect for the theory of comedy. He has this whole science behind it that he thinks about thoroughly. Do you have that same kind of philosophy on comedy and music and writing?
I think it changes all the time for me because I think my tastes change all the time. But Patton is a true craftsman. From his joke writing to his script writing to all that stuff, he's a very careful craftsman, and it really comes across. And he is always funny. He really gets it. And he's also so much more of a live performer than I am. I mean, he makes a living at it, and watching him is so much fun. But absolutely, I think the thing is you have to remember. It's just like guitar playing. When you sit down to play guitar, you have to remember 3 or 4 simple things. Don't press too hard. Make sure your hands are nice and warm, and and then you have to kind of talk your muscles into doing the same thing, But it's trying to be relaxed and trying to have the science of it there. I mean, again, in order to play fast guitar, I have to have the conditions have to be right. My hands have to be warm. I have to be playing through the right cut of an amp. My action has to be at a certain place, and that's how you write good comedy too. You have to set up a very safe environment so it can happen, where the story is completely clear, and then jokes just start happening everywhere.
Nice. So that's interesting to me. But I don't know how much time we have to explore it, although I wish I could.
How about one more, and then I should probably get moving.
All right. I guess I would really like to know, the animation is very detailed in Metalocalypse, and you talked about being very careful about paying attention to the guitar crowd, even going as far as to sync the fingers on the fretboards to the music. that seems very time-consuming and expensive. Does it make it difficult to animate the characters moving naturally? Do you ever miss the simplicity of home movies?
Home movies was something that we kind of like. It was strange because home movies we didn't really get a lot of. We kind of got like one take on the animation. Where we're like, that's it, and we got to keep moving. On this show, we have such a sharp, strong team with led by Antonio Canobio, who is just he's the reason that the show looks so good. And I sit with him on all kinds of stuff, and he gets excited by being able to do stuff that he doesn't get to do on other shows, which is basically almost design brand new backgrounds and brand new sets for every single show. So one way that we try to keep the show fresh is to have them be in new, exciting places all the time, because that's part of what a band does, is they travel constantly. And within that, of course, is like, musical authenticity. And it's all time consuming, even having a band just lift a glass of water and drink from it. To do that without making it wobble too much or seem like a paper doll is doing it, it takes good acting, from an animator. And that's the same with like it is totally like if you want to be an animator, I think there's a madness that you must have. And it's the same kind of thing where the guitarist has that too. You have to sit there and slowly play scales for about 6 years.
Yeah.
With like no satisfaction.
Mm-hmm. Does the detail...
And then one day you're playing blisteringly fast and you're making real music, But when I would teach, basically I would film myself for the guitar solos and talk to Mike Roush, who was the main animator. He's the head animator on the show, but he just kind of understood how the guitar was working, though he's not a guitarist at all. So I'd have to give him basically a guitar lesson. So I'd say, look at what my right hand is doing. I'm just picking on this low string. I would and I'm up here on the 5th fret doing this, and then I go down for the second section, break it down, and I'm going to play along with the song, then I'm going to break it down again. And here's what the other guitar player is doing. And so you see on some things when there are two divided guitar parts that one guy's doing one thing and the other guy's doing the other thing. And the reason for doing that is because I don't think anyone else would.
Right.
And I just think it's as long as you're doing it, it'll go the whole way, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was always frustrated younger, like seeing...
Yeah, you feel like Joe's in the Pussycats and they don't care. They're playing guitars backwards, upside down, it doesn't matter.
Does the extreme detail and like the careful animation, does that contribute to the short runtime of Metalocalypse?
Well, the third season was half hour, so that's out on Blu-ray as of last fall. Mm-hmm. So you should check those out. And it's a fun, longer exploration of character and story and stuff. But no, that was just that's just the Adult Swim format, and we'll probably end up doing some more of those at some point too, like the quarter hours. And it's just it's a smart format for just keeping viewership hungry,
Right.
Here's another show. Here's another show.
Exactly. Did you ever think of doing like a Metalocalypse movie?
I would love to. I think it would lend itself to a long-form film really, really well. I think it'd be really cool to almost treat it like a musical.
I think so as well. I mean, it seems to me like there's, and I could be crazy, but there's so much going on in the show. It's very complex. There's many layers. There's many threads to follow as far as a story, from the tribunal to, Dethklok's own self-obsession to the fans' reactions and et cetera, et cetera. I think that would...
Yeah, it would be fun to really plot it out and just... Well, I've had an idea for a movie for a while. It's a matter of time, and you can't really make a TV show. I mean, when I talk about the people that work on this TV show, there are 5 or 6 of us, really. Mm-hmm. Art director, head animator, 2 directors, and an editor, and that's pretty much the show. Then we farm out animation to different people, but it's us. So there's only so much we can take on at a time. And hopefully, if we're going to do that, then we wouldn't be able to do the TV show, but maybe it's worth it.
Maybe. I think it'd be awesome, especially to see it in theaters with the epic sound and get the whole, instead of just...
I know, it'd be so fun to sound design the whole world.
I know. It does seem like because of the complexity of the storylines and the characters, you have to kind of pick and choose what parts of the story to represent in the short format shows? Do you ever feel like
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. I mean, you're always at the mercy of how much time you're given, and you're going to always bump up against it in one way or another. If you've got 2 minutes, you're probably going to write 3 minutes, you know? And that's just something that happens. It isn't an exact science, and I know all TV shows are kind of function the same way, where they put too much stuff, too many ideas in, and especially a show like this, where we definitely did a lot of developing to make sure that the whole world could live and breathe, and not just these 5 characters. You know, there's a whole outside world, and there's the manager who's got this whole secret life and all this different stuff. And we just wanted to develop it like a comic book, you know, and then, you know, hopefully lead it towards a satisfying path.
Right. And of course, the Sumerian aspect, the prophecy, the superpowers of Mr. Salatsik. Is that how you say his name? Salatsik?
Oh, Salacia.
Salacia. All right.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I think that's all we have for you today. Thank you so much.
All right, cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay.